Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. I'm Bradly Halestorm, founder of LionWing, and today we are doing a developer interview with Ken Rose, the lead game designer on Gun and Gun from Studio Keep Dry. And Ken, thanks for being willing to do this live Q&A. You never know how these things are going to go, so I really appreciate your willingness to do it, and thanks for joining me today.
No problem. Thank you for having me here today.
Excellent. Yeah, so Ken and I talked about doing this live Q&A months ago, long before the Kickstarter ever started, and so we've been excited about being able to, having an opportunity to talk about Gun and Gun in this kind of way, and we're excited that a lot of you are joining us here. I see on the Discord, so thank you all. We are going to mostly be covering gameplay and game content related questions. So if you have questions about the Kickstarter or the campaign or backer rewards or anything like that, we won't be addressing those today since we have the lead authority on Gun and Gun. I want to make sure that we're using our time wisely. But if you have questions about the Kickstarter or anything related to that, reach out to us through all the available channels and we'll get right back to you. Okay, so let's just jump right into it, Ken. People want to hear from
Sure.
you, so we might as well get to the questions. I'll start with the first question, and I should say that these are questions that I've compiled over the duration of the campaign. So some of these questions you all directly asked in response to this interview, but then some of them are just questions you all have asked throughout the campaign that I've noted that I want to bring up with Ken, and hopefully we are able to provide you with the answers you're looking for. So the first thing, Ken, what exactly does your role entail as lead game designer on Gun and Gun?
Well, my role is exactly more or less how it reads. I am the main game designer on Gun and Done. I have designed the basics and fundamentals of the game, including card effects, game systems, guns, cards, skills, whatever you name it. I've also overseen most of the testing on the game, and yeah, that's basically it.
Great, great. So when did development on Gun and Gun really start?
If I'm correct, because it's been a while now, the original idea of Gun on Gun came up in a conversation between Kata, who's another member of the team, and I 2 years ago in winter.
Okay. All right, so it's been a while. So it makes sense
Yeah.
that you would just be getting ready to release Overheat next month, which is
Mhm.
cool. So I'm just going through my questions here in the order that I have them down here. So I may not have some great segues, but I'm just going to be jumping all around. So since this was a question that actually just came through the Discord last night. Since Gun and Gun will be played in tournaments and it's an expandable card game, how will you and the team can address adding new cards to the game while still allowing kind of the older cards to be relevant? And then I'll ask the next question after that.
Okay, so this is a question which we are basically still tackling to a certain degree. As the Kickstarter release has kind of shown, the first original base game and Overheat is a block to a certain degree and has been basically designed with the whole roster in mind, with all six gunners, 9 guns, and so on. And most likely we will be moving on to the next block from our next release. Now that doesn't mean that will be that all cards from the first block will not be used in gameplay anymore. We are considering various ways to keep those guns in the game, but without just continuously adding more guns and more gunners and so on, because that feels like it kind of limits our design space, where we have to make sure that every single gun is relevant and every single gun is not broken in combo with another gun. And also, it kind of makes the game harder, the barrier for entry higher for newer players. One of the ideas we have, and this is just an idea, so please take it with a grain of salt or whatever at this moment, but is having a format where players randomly choose 6 guns and 4 gunners out of the entire gun and gun roster, and then they have to play the gun and gun game from those guns.
Awesome. No, that sounds super cool. I think that's the first I've heard of that. So that's fantastic. That sounds fun. All right, next question here. As I mentioned, we're just going to be rapid firing going through these. We've got about an hour, so I want to make sure we get through everything. And this may be a question more for me, but I'll ask it anyway. And if you want to tack on anything, Ken, definitely feel free to. So this came in through the Discord last night, and it says, after the Kickstarter, how will the team keep in touch with the player base on what gets added and what gets removed from the game, such as new rules, new sets, etc.? Will there be a website that's actively updated? So I can tackle that last question. Will there be a website that's actively updated? Yes. LionWing will have a website, a dedicated website for Gun and Gun that's actively updated, so that everyone's kept abreast of all of the changes and updates to the game, so that everyone kind of knows where to go. We haven't put that together yet. It might be an extension of our current website, or it might be its own thing. I haven't quite decided just yet. Or it might be an extension of the leaderboard that I have set up. If you guys checked out the Gun and Gun portal that we have set up and linked in the Kickstarter, you can see kind of what our virtual league is going to look like in terms of leaderboard standings and that kind of thing. So I may post kind of the updates there as well, since folks will be consulting that pretty regularly anyway. But that's still a little undecided, but it'll be somewhere in the domain of one of those things, if not a combination of those things that I just talked about. Ken, is there anything you want to add, especially to that first part of after the Kickstarter, how will the team keep in touch with the player base on what gets added or removed?
Well, you basically answered the most difficult part of that question for me about the website and so on. Yeah, all I'll say is that we plan to keep in touch with the community. We plan to keep in touch with the players. Albeit it will probably be a little bit more difficult for us. Probably there will be a little bit of a delay for us when reaching out to the Western community, as everything will be decided. Our team works in Japanese and works in Japan, and it will basically go through my translation filter before it reaches you guys. But yeah, we'll try to keep the game. We'll try to keep the game always exciting. We'll try to follow how people are feeling about the game and reacting to that, and so on.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I mean, I really think that speaks to the kind of studio that Keep Dry is and how you guys operate, of wanting to listen to the fans and being willing to listen to the fans and making sure that the channels are open to listen to the fans, which is fantastic. We will definitely be doing the same thing. We want Gun and Gun to be, a very welcoming community, and we want to make sure that players in our community are heard and can engage with us. So, this question also came in through the Discord last night, specifically about kind of tournament play or organized play, competitive play, what have you, in Japan. And that is there a standard with how tournament play happens in Japan as it pertains to how many copies of the game players need to bring with them to these events?
Well, to be honest, actually, we haven't had a proper tournament yet up to this point. But the timing is actually perfect, because we are having our first official tournament next week. And in that tournament, we are playing the two-set format, where each player will bring one set of Gun and Gun. This is not final, as in formatting rules for tournament play in general. But from a designer's perspective, yes, I have designed the game to be played with two sets for tournament play.
Great. Yeah, and again, these things aren't final on our side either for the competitive scene. I mean, we've still got a little bit of time to tighten that up, but that'll pretty much be the standard for us as well in terms of our virtual league. I mean, obviously it's a little different with the virtual league, but even still going forward for North American competitive play, it'll likely be the format of everyone brings their own copy. That way, you can allow for same gun drafts, which is what we're looking for. That being said, if a store or if people want to run their own league, where you're only allowing kind of one gun picks, that's totally fine. That's cool. We've played that in play testing, and it's fun. It's just, that experience, to me anyway, resembles a little bit more of like a traditional board game experience that is really great for folks who are not really looking to get into like the super competitive scene, which is why we won't probably be running that as an official kind of format. But I definitely think if that's your thing, if you want to do that, awesome, go for it. I think that's cool.
Just to I guess elevate on that a little bit. Gun and gun. One set gun and gun and two set gun and gun are not either superior or inferior to each other. One set gun and gun is a more traditional board game experience where there's a certain level of strategy that is existent in that format that is not in the two set format, where you have to think about what guns your opponents will be taking, and basically what guns you choose that are limiting your opponent's options and so on. So it's Gun and Gun is always for Gun and Gun is for everybody. We want people to be able to enjoy whichever format they like in whatever way they want to.
Yeah, absolutely. There is some tactical diversity in only being able to choose one gun. There only being one copy of the gun on the field at any one time. So that that does introduce some new elements of strategy. Okay, next question here. We've heard a lot of questions about the usage of voltage cards. And by that, I mean a lot of folks have asked if there are any uses for voltage beyond skill activation. Can you talk a little bit about voltage or what might be in the plans for voltage? Not specifics, but just the design space around it.
So of course, yeah. Currently, for the cards that will be released in the Kickstarter and the cards will be released and on our end, voltage does not have any use beyond being used for skill cards. I will slightly hint that some of the unreleased skill cards have a little bit more unique uses of voltage than maybe the cards revealed at this point. So that might be a bit exciting. But further than that, I think... So actually, those cards, when revealed, will kind of show you the future possibilities of what we have planned for voltage. So I guess a lot of voices, a lot of people opinions we've heard is that basically once you use your skill, your voltage is basically irrelevant in the game, which is true. It's especially with characters like Hibana, who are basically centered around charging voltage. Basically, once you use her skill, if not one of the reusable skills, her unique ability is basically irrelevant, and I can understand how that feels a little bit lackluster for some people. So we'll definitely be looking into more things we can do with voltage, whether it's guns that use voltage for something, or whether it's gun deck cards that use voltage for something. I'm not sure at this point, completely sure at this point, but that's certainly design space we're intentionally leaving open for more interesting card design in the future.
Great. Yeah, no, that's probably the answer that people were looking for, which is exciting to know that voltage may be used for some additional mechanics in the future. Ken, your video has been kind of cutting out according to the Discord, and I'm seeing it as well. But your audio's coming in fine. So I'm getting you here and there coming in for a few seconds, and then you're disappearing on me or freezing up on me. But your audio sounds good. So we'll just keep... We'll keep plugging along. We'll go through the next question, and if it hasn't fixed itself by then, I'll probably just have you jump out of the room, jump back in.
Okay.
Oh, you're back now, so hopefully that fixed it. All right. Let's see here. Next question. Okay, so what was the reason for putting the draw phase at the end of a turn as opposed to the more typical start of turn approach?
Probably just a flash idea that came into my mind about switching up traditional card gameplay for Gun and Gun. For Gun and Gun, kind of segues into something a little bit different, but I wanted to incorporate things that are usually a little bit more random into the base abilities of the gunners. One thing that's a little bit more clear on that front is the gunner speed, where basically which player goes first is determined by the gunners themselves and not by like a coin flip or something like that. And as an extension of that, changing up the hand size was a way to, what do you say? Was a way to, well, further differentiate between the gunners. And then with a fixed gun size, with a fixed hand size, it felt more natural for the draw phase to be at the end of the turn to include other forms of interaction, such as hand disruption or whatsoever. Also with with reaction cards and so on. It just kind of all fall into place, if you know what I mean. When designing the game, it just came naturally.
Yeah, sure. I actually like the. It took me a minute to get used to it, but I like the draw being at the end of the turn because it does set you up for some solid defensive moves, especially with reaction cards. So I do like that. Gun and Gun does these things where it's just small tweaks to the formula that I think really adds character to the game, and you wouldn't think that something like speed being the thing that decides who goes first, or the draw phase being at the end of the turn instead of at the beginning of the turn, that would really make that much of a difference, but it actually does, especially when all of the parts come together, all of these smaller additions come together. It creates kind of a larger change and a larger dynamic that's different from the rest of other card games, which is fantastic. And I like the customization options that are available, especially as it pertains to gunner stats. People undersell speed. Obviously that's not the most important number on the card, on a gunner's card, but it is an important number nevertheless, and I really like that. Sometimes going first is what you need. So, all right, next question here. Can you talk a little bit about the inspiration behind the 2 guns, 2 deck system?
2 gun, 2 deck system. So I guess the inspirations are things about things like what kind of what other games maybe led to those inspirations and so on. First, from an aesthetic point of view, the 2 guns and cyborg girls is basically just a brainchild of Keita, who basically just liked that aesthetic. He just wanted to have a game with cyborg anime girls fighting with 2 guns, wielding 2 guns. So that's one thing. Gameplay wise, I think I would introduce such games as Sakura Arms, where we basically had where you have 2 Megami, the 2 girls, the 2 samurai girls you choose from at the beginning of the game, and construct your deck from. And another inspiration I would like to introduce is a game called Gruff. Gruff is a game where you become a shepherd of monsters, monsters that are called sheep within the game, but you choose 3 monsters within the game. And one thing unique about Gruff is that you basically play the game with all 3 of those monsters, like as if they were your 3 Pokemon. Keita and I both really enjoyed that aspect of Gruff, where you not only choose those monsters for their cards, but also continue to use those monsters within the game, where they really become the basis of your strategy, and it feels like you're fighting with those monsters themselves, and so that was introduced into Gun and Gun.
Sure, yeah, and you can tell Gruff's inspiration in terms of feeling like you're wielding the monsters in Gruff and feeling like you're wielding the actual guns themselves in Gun and Gun. I can see the inspiration there big time, which is cool. So we've heard a lot from folks that Black Rock Shooter was clearly an inspiration for the game's art, or at least with the gunner designs. Something a lot of people have pointed out. So who on the team loved BRS, and what other games or anime inspired Gun and Gun's overall aesthetic and visual design?
So again, Keita sort of likes Black Rock Shooter. I don't know. I guess for most of the people on the team, Black Rock Shooter is just kind of thought of as one of the benchmarks for that kind of design. So I don't think anybody in the team dislikes Black Rock Shooter. Also, our main artist for the Gunner cards, Inami, is certainly a fan of the series and the aesthetic. Other anime franchises I would certainly like to raise are Alita Battle Angel, and so the cyborg battle kind of aesthetic, and also the steampunk post-apocalyptic, all things after the end of the world kind of aesthetic mixed into one thing are certainly there. With promotional material and so on, there's a lot of more traditional cyberpunk going on with Blade Runner style aesthetics, but while also keeping the themes and general storyline of the game light enough to not shun away anybody who's just there to play the game.
Sure. Yeah, I don't think people think about the fact that Blade Runner has played a huge part in Gun and Gun's visual approach, especially. So, I mean, just judging from this question, that someone asked what other games and anime, assuming that they were just Japanese properties that factored into your all's inspiration and what drove Gun and Gun's design. But Blade Runner, especially Blade Runner 2049, as you've told us, played a huge part in Gun and Gun. I think you can see that a lot, especially if you know that now. You can see a lot of design was inspired by that film. So, speaking of the story, so what inspired the story? Because I know you've told me before that you wanted to make sure that the story was light, and at the same time, the backdrop of the story in and of itself is a little grim. It's a little bleak. So, can you talk to us a little bit about how the story came together?
So, the story, I guess, this will kind of segue into to talk about how, at what level we designed the story and kind of how it came into, how it was born. I'll need to segue into Core Connection a little bit. Sorry to talk about other games. The Core Connection is another game that we've designed in the past. It's a robot deck builder. It's a mecha deck builder where players choose a mecha from a roster and use cards and weapons to buff up those mechas and defeat monsters. Now, what I would like to mention about Core Connection is Core Connection also has a very similar approach where it has a world. It has a world and it has an anime feel that more almost tricks you into believing that there is a pre-existing franchise behind it. Where there's a world, there's characters, worlds, and there's like flavor text on cards that suggests that there's a large story going on. And I'm not saying there isn't, but it actually kind of tricks you to the point where you believe that there's actually like a 50-episode anime going on, where that's actually not the case. There's more like a rough idea of what's going on, a rough idea of what's happening. Another example I would give that's close to that model is like early days of Overwatch, where Overwatch had its heroes, its characters, and general idea of what's going on, but that not really anything specifically set in stone for what's actually going on within the game. For Gun and Gun, we wanted something close to that, where we had we wanted the scope of a larger world. We wanted the scope of like a series of like of something like where players feel like there's an anime going on and there's a stage going on, but not so set in concrete that people still have the freedom of imagination, freedom to imagine what's actually going on, and to a certain extent, when playing their own games, building their own stories about the characters.
Sure, yeah, I think that's a cool part about, especially the competitive card game arena, is you can include as much fluff as you want. You can include a none, and people may not miss it, but I like games that include at least some, and Gun and Gun has a good amount of fluff, but it also leaves a little bit to your imagination. It's not going to tell you every little detail about the world or the characters. You get to sort of fill in the gaps with your own mind. It sort of reminds me of the early days of RPGs, where you didn't get to see everything. Graphics were obviously very limited, and so your mind just sort of filled in the gaps. I think about that often when I played Final Fantasy VII Remake, how the world was so much more realized this time around, and I almost liked it in the original because I got to fill in some of the gaps that the game just couldn't because of technical limitations. And Gun and Gun certainly has that vibe too. And we've had a lot of folks ask about the story. More folks than I was anticipating asking about the story of a competitive card game. So I'm glad it exists, and I'm glad it's super cool. I'm glad the characters are interesting. I'm glad the world's interesting. It seems like people seem to think that as well. The Gunners especially, I'm really excited to show off the manga so that people can get to see kind of a different side of the Gunners, or get to see more of the Gunners than they have, or than they would just by looking at the cards. All right, so let's see here. Next question. So for your audience, the Japanese audience, what have they enjoyed the most about Gun and Gun?
Well, I think it just comes down to how easy it is to get into Gun and Gun. As by design, Gun and Gun is a game that's very easy to pick up. All you really need to do just to get playing is choose a gunner, choose 2 guns, and choose one out of 3 skills for that gunner, and you're all set. There's no deck construction after that. Which is probably both a strength and weakness of the game. Yeah, and even on your first fly, it's easy to kind of, especially because with the gun cards, which has their own set of abilities, it's pretty easy to see what is your basic line of strategy with those guns. So if somebody has some degree of experience with card games, trading card games or deck builders or whatsoever, to take a look at those 6 guns and say, okay, I want to build a deck that does this with these 2 guns, or I want to, okay, these guns seem to combo with each other. Like an easy example being like maybe with Kasane and Hakumen, where, okay, so this gun deals self-damage but has high damage output, but this gun heals itself. So maybe I can combo those together. And we've also designed the game to basically work in that way intuitively. When people have a certain idea in mind like that, we want to reward that with that strategy working to some degree within the game. And so, one, it's easy to get into the game. 2, it's easy to enjoy the game because your strategies are easily recognized. But then 3, there's actually more depth to the game than probably most people perceive at the first moment, because of the amount of actual choices you have during gameplay. Mainly being the 2 deck aspect of the game, where you're constantly deciding between which deck you're playing, which gun deck cards you're playing throughout the game. When people get better at the game, and when people start playing with other people who are also better at the game speed also ramps up quite a bit, and you realize that you don't exactly have the time to use all of the cards in your guns. And you realize that while this game doesn't have deck construction, it actually has that deck construction aspect is kind of put into the game on the fly. You are always considering which cards that you want to play from which gun decks during the game. So you're basically constructing your deck. Yeah, you can say you're constructing the deck during the game. And added with the fact that the level of strategy that unique skills add, which are also something that people probably catch on after playing the game a few times, and how they're hidden and how they can be used to counter your opponent's strategies. Or how they can be used to turn around to basically catch your opponent off guard. There's actually a whole new level of strategy beyond that initial deck what was the term you coined in the English version for the choosing of the decks?
The modular deck construction with the loadout.
Yeah,
Yeah.
with yeah. There's a whole new level strategy beyond that, and beyond your basic combos. So yeah, to sum up, easy to get in, easy to enjoy, but also hard to master.
Definitely. Yeah, I think people, they see or hear that there's not deck construction and they might think, okay, well, there can only be so much strategy in the game. But I think that's a kind of a fallacy in one's thoughts, because there's a ton of depth in the game. It's just it's acquired through different means than you would traditionally assume it is. Yeah, I think there's a lot of combos. There's a lot of elements that go into the game that make it deceptively deep. Upon first glance, and this is what I love about Gun and Gun, upon first glance and like when you're first playing, it seems like a really easy, accessible game, and it is, which is awesome. This speaks to your all's ability to execute on your vision really well. But once you start playing the game, you start seeing things that you didn't see in the beginning, which is, any good card game should have that, and certainly that's true with Gun and Gun, which is super cool. So a couple more questions here. How hard was it to introduce an expansion to a game that you already feel is pretty tightly balanced?
Well, certainly was difficult, but maybe not so difficult as. So introducing an expansion was not only about introducing more balance to the game. It wasn't just about which we did. Certainly was the expansion definitely did play a part in making the game even more balanced with feedback from our Japanese player base. But it was also about making the game more exciting. It was also about making the introducing new aspects and new cards, new rules, new effects that will add more spice to the game. Will make the game more fun. And like some of the new card effects that were introduced were certainly with that kind of train of thought in mind. And when it comes to new things that we would like to do and new things that we'd like to introduce, at this point in Gun and Gun, there's still quite a lot in our books of things we want to do within Gun and Gun. So, yeah, well, balancing is always difficult. It's always an issue, but thinking up of new cards and effects is still quite enjoyable, and I wouldn't say easy, because once you come up with those designs, you actually have to make sure they actually are fun. But yeah, something that I'm not afraid of doing more and more at this point.
Sure, yeah. And we won't get into spoiler territory, but there's some really cool stuff that Overheat introduces. So, all right. Speaking of which, if you can't do this, that's fine. I understand. Can you preview, even if it's in general terms, some of the newer additions introduced by Overheat?
Well, so in Overheat, one thing that I kept in mind, and something that I think I'll try to more and more establish moving on into future iterations of Gun and Gun, is the specifics of each gun type. So there are 3 gun types in Gun and Gun. There's a light gun, heavy gun, and special gun. The basis being that light guns are fast and aggressive. Heavy guns are slow but devastating, and special guns are good, and actually a little bit of everything. They got but mostly their specialty is disruption. We wanted to build upon that, where aggressive light guns are certainly aggressive and fast, but also a little bit more limited in what they can do. They really need you to think of. They need some thought put into them as how you support their limited capabilities. So maybe a gun can do this, but in order to actually do that, you need to supplement with X or Y or something like that. Light guns are kind of like that. Heavy guns are good. Heavy guns are good, but sometimes they're a little bit more reactionary. As I said, they're slow, so you need to think about that in your game plan. Special guns are disruptive, but you have to remember that Gun and Gun is a game about either decreasing your opponent's life or deck to 0. So you can't win the game just by disrupting your opponent. And so, as a basic theme of Gun and Gun, I've always tried to keep guns not completely self-made engines, where guns one gun can't win you the game. We've certainly, and with Overheat, we've tried to further deepen that aspect of the game by introducing more unique characteristics of each gun type into the 3 guns.
Yeah, and I mean, knowing what Overheat includes, I would say mission accomplished there. So here's a question that we've gotten a lot on our Facebook ads, actually, a lot of comments. No one asked this in the Discord or the Kickstarter or anything, but I had to just bring it up. Can we ever expect to see a male gunner in future content releases of Gun and Gun?
Oh, never say never. Currently, well, especially with Gun and Gun, and not just Gun and Gun, but basically all of our games, Keep Dry always wants to make sure that the people who, so basically us, we enjoy what we're making, and probably what just the hot thing among the designers of Gun and Gun right now is the cyborg anime girl aesthetic. So I think that will be the focus for a long while. But yeah, I mean, Skullgirls had that instrument that I forgot the name. I'm sorry, but I always think any kind of possibility is open, especially when further down the road when we're trying out new things and trying out even more possibly weirder ideas.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, I've responded to those questions of there's sort of a male character in the game, kind of, maybe. You'll have to play the game.
I will tell you that there is a male gunner in the lore.
Yes.
That is something I can say.
Yeah. Yes. So over time, you will see
Yes.
what all that means. And last question here. I haven't checked the Discord in a minute. I'll look at my phone here in a second. But the last question that I have here is sort of a general question that we've gotten quite a bit, and that is, what can folks expect from new content? Oh, 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 oh. Hello.
Hello?
All right, and we're back. I don't know what just happened there. All right, it wouldn't be one of my streams without there being some sort of technical glitch, and now your video is not showing up at all, Ken. But we're nearing the end here anyway.
Can you still hear me?
I can still hear you. Yeah.
Okay, so at least there's that.
Yeah. So the last question here. What can folks expect from new content releases from Gun and Gun? You kind of already talked about that in the beginning, but is there anything else you want to add to it?
I guess one thing I would add is that, and also I was going to mention this when we're talking about the story, but I forgot. I will tell you. I can tell everybody that we're interested in other mediums. For Gun and Gun, we're interested in seeing what we can do with the characters, with the world. We're considering ways that we can basically introduce the world of Gun and Gun in other ways. Of course, without introducing too much of the world, so leaving some gaps for people to fill in with their imagination. And so maybe not. There may be releases of Gun and Gun may not just be limited to board game, card game releases.
All right. Someone said Gun and Gun gotcha game. We'll see. as Ken said, never say never, right?
Yeah.
All right, let me. That was the last of our questions that I have down here. Let me scroll through the Discord chat and make sure we didn't miss anything. Here is your opportunity to get in your last questions as we get ready to sign off here. If y'all want to get some Gun and Gun Figma going on, I'll be on the pre-order. There you have it. Okay. I don't think we missed anything. Lots of chatter. Sorry, guys, if I could not keep up with it all. But it doesn't look like I'm missing any questions. Anyway.
Think how difficult it is to release a new game in Japan versus bringing it over to the West. I guess this might be a game question more for.
Yeah, where'd you see that? Sorry, I didn't.
Yourself.
Is that on the Kickstarter?
I know it's on the gun. That's on the Gun and Gun channel.
Okay.
Maybe you missed it because that's right while you were. Probably.
Here we go. Yeah, it was right toward the end. Isn't a game? I was wondering how difficult it is to release a new game in Japan versus bring it over to the West. Does Japan have a better audience for newer IP? We could probably both answer that. What do you think, Ken?
How difficult it is? Well, actually, let me confirm I understand the question here. How difficult to release it versus bring it over to the West? I think I'll start with the first question, and I'll hand the reins over to you for the second. Japan has a Japan's board game scene has developed this unique, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with, this unique culture of doujin games, where there are a lot of basically self-made, self-published games, there's a lot of buzz surrounding those games. There's a whole community of people who follow such games, and actually the biggest game events in Japan, being called Game Market, happens twice a year in Japan, is mostly of people with those doujin games. Keep Gun and Gun is not a doujin game anymore because Keep Dry is a corporation, is a company, a small company. Certainly, the developing process of Gun and Gun certainly was that of a doujin game, where we're a group of people who basically have 9-to-5s and other jobs, but are also working at Gun and Gun at the same time, halfly as a hobby and halfly as something that we're as life work. And it was easy. I wouldn't say easy, but there was a welcoming atmosphere in Japan for games like us that basically come out of nowhere and are self-published.
Yeah, and on the Western end, I think there's quite an audience for it as well, for non-pre-existing IPs to be successful. I mean, that's all we've really dealt with at LionWing. We've never worked on anything from an established IP. Not that we wouldn't, not that we won't, but all of our stuff has been new IPs, at least for the Western audience. But even beyond that, just in general. So yeah, I think there's a market for it. I think people like it. I think people like when they can kind of jump into a new franchise at the beginning and sort of feel a part of it in a way that they wouldn't if they were jumping into the 4th, 5th, or 10th installment of something. So I do think that there's something there. I mean, just thinking about my own consuming habits, my own consumer habits, I like when I can get into something at the front end. And so I really like new IPs of stuff that hasn't been established before. I think that's fun. And to watch it grow over time I think is really interesting. And so that certainly has been part of my process when I'm looking at games to bring over to the English market. I typically do look for stuff that's from a non-established IP. All right. Anything else? Let's see here. Will the Japanese community and the Western community be able to pitch ideas to Gun and Gun in the future? Ken?
Yeah, we'd certainly like to hear ideas. We're still working on what the best channels to do that would be. Well, as probably Bradley has mentioned before, I am in the Gun and Gun Discord channel. And I am reading a lot of the comments toward the game, and I continue to plan to do so. And also, Keep Dry has a Twitter account, a Gmail account, which is mostly functioning in Japanese, but I'm checking both. So any English emails or direct messages sent to those channels will be seen by me. Hopefully replied by me in a timely fashion, but they're definitely seen by me. And so, yeah, I guess my answer would be that feel free to tell us any kind of feedback, any kind of opinions on what you'd like to see from Gun and Gun, any more specific maybe thoughts you have about Gun and Gun, maybe about game balance or about possibilities for new card ideas, whatsoever. We're happy to hear everything.
Yeah, so everything you're saying in the chat is being seen by Ken, which is awesome, and obviously we're listening too. And anything that Ken doesn't see or pick up, then we are conveying that information to them as well. I think it's great when a community can be a part of a game in that way. So keep the suggestions coming. All right, let's see anything else. Someone is typing in the chat. I don't know if it's a question or not, or if they're just typing something else. But I think that is it then. We're coming up on our hour mark. Anyway, Ken, is there any final remarks you'd like to make while you've got people here watching us or listening to us?
Well, I guess I'd just like to add basically a whole thank you from the entire Keep Dry team for anybody who's for basically everybody who's supporting us at this point, albeit being backing LionWing Publishing on Kickstarter, or just being in this Discord, checking out information, or here with us, listening to me babble about the game. It's just it means a lot to us, just the fact that there are so many people who are interested and want to play the games that we developed. And yeah, so a big thanks for the entire team.
Yeah, and same goes for me. Thanks everyone for being a part of the community and asking questions and just talking about the game in the Discord and the comments section on social media, whatever. Again, I'm reading everything. I try to respond to as much as I can. And it's been a real pleasure just getting to meet all of you and interact with all of you and read your questions, your comments, your suggestions. It's just been like really, I don't know, it's been heartwarming. The Discord wasn't as popular prior to Gun and Gun, so Gun and Gun has certainly brought in a bunch of fresh blood, and it's been cool just to see the community grow in that regard. And the game isn't even, we're not even done with the Kickstarter yet. People have 2 loadouts to play, and people are poring over the cards and asking questions and providing really great feedback that we're going to be implementing into the final versions of the cards and into the rulebook for the sake of clarity in a lot of situations. So it's been super great to have you all a part of this process, and thanks so much for being the reason why we're at right now with the Kickstarter. I mean, without your support, without your enthusiasm, without your excitement, without you talking about the game, we would not be here. Truly, it's thanks to all of you that we are. So many, many thanks. That could never even begin to scratch the surface of how grateful I am to have all of you here on board with us and showing your enthusiasm and support. So thank you. And I think that'll do it for tonight. Thanks everyone for being here. Thank you, Ken, again, for answering these questions. And until next time, folks, we will see you. Take care.